guys come from? There are like 3 of you here when we started, man. We turned the lights on. You guys are like cockroaches. How'd you like that? You go to church and get called a cockroach right out of the bat. I didn't get finished with Easter last week, so I'm going to continue on if that's cool. How did y'all think of the Axeman? I'm glad you came back, and I'm glad you're not wearing like face masks, so that's cool. If you missed out, then you missed out. So we had a good time. So chips were flying, and it was stay engaged or get hit. So that's a good thing. Yeah, we hadn't heard any lawsuits, so that's a good thing. I was talking about a verse last week I want to hit on a little bit more, and it's Jesus talking in Revelation chapter 21. And Jesus says something pretty interesting in Revelation chapter 21. It says, "Behold, I am making all things new." And if you go back and you look and you see all the events that are recorded here, you see this awesome king come, and he's triumphant, and he conquers death, hell, and the grave, and he's the overcoming, conquering king, and he establishes his kingdom. And as he establishes his kingdom, he sets things back to the way God intends them to be, and things are restored, and the world's restored. And he says this, "Behold, I am making all things new." And right before that, he says something interesting. He says, "I will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. Former things have passed away." And I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about a broken, fallen world. In Genesis, our world falls apart. You guys realize that? Y'all, like, everybody familiar with the story of Adam and Eve? Pretty much. Yeah, kind of, right? Well, Adam and Eve, what happens in their story is God had the world as he intended to be. Heaven and earth were together. God walked among his people. He was among his people. They lived, they conversed. It was literally heaven on earth. It was Eden. And Eden is the word that the Jewish people use for heaven. It's Eden. And so people lived in Eden with God, and it was great. And then mankind, though, even though they walked with God and they knew God and they saw the glory of God, they still rebelled against God, right? And we always say, well, if I could see God, or if I could walk with God really and talk with God really, there's no way I would rebel against God. Well, come on. We're human. We do. Well, it don't even mean humans. A third of the angels said, "You know what? We're out of here." A third of the angels. Satan is like God's worship leader. They're the ones in the inner circle, the closest ones, and they're like, "We're out of here. We're not putting up with this. We're going to go do our own thing, going to do it our own way." So what happens in Genesis is the world falls apart. So when the world falls apart, sinners into the world, and the world comes under the judgment of God. Now, what was the judgment of God? It was a little rainstorm. Took place in Genesis, right? A little rainstorm. It was the judgment of God, and God judged the world, and he finds the only righteous people on earth, and he puts them in an ark, in a tomb, and he brings judgment to the world. And God says something weird right after this, and this is something you may not have thought about before, because right now we're in a world that everybody seems to think is ending, right? I mean, haven't you guys heard that the world's ending? Have you heard that? I mean, it's everywhere. Dude, if you turn on the History Channel, the world's ending. Apocalypse. Everything's the apocalypse, which really just means the revealing, so don't get all worked up about that. The apocalypse, the end of everything. Everything's going to hell. Everything's doomed. Everything's tragic. Everything's bad. Everything's getting worse. Hide your kids, hide your wife. It's terrible, right? But God says something pretty interesting here in Genesis. After he makes this covenant with Noah, he says this. Noah built an altar and offered sacrifice to God, and when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intentions of man's heart is evil from his youth. Amen? No, just something I've realized to be true the more I have youth. So, no, my parents realized it a long time ago, though. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. That's odd, right? History Channel missed that one. And then the Bible says something in just about every translation. It says this: while the earth remains, seed time and harvest time, cold and heat, summer and winter, and days shall not cease. So there's an implication that as long as the earth remains, that, these things will happen. But here's a problem with that. The word while and the word remains are the same word. And the word means like henceforth, or ongoing, or unceasing. So the actual wording here in ancient old school Hebrew has to do with an idea of revolving, of never stopping, of continuance, right? So God says clearly, as he makes a covenant, that I'm not ever going to destroy the world again. Bummer. Right? Why is that a bummer? I have had more people argue with me over this because they're like, no, the God says he's going to destroy the world. I'm like, no, he actually says he's not. And they're like, no, the world's going to hell. Can't you tell? To which I say, Jesus said, behold, I'm making all things new. And here's what I've noticed, and here's what God showed me, and this was pretty interesting as God's revealing this to me, is that I start to look around and I see houses. Like, we built a house about 5 years ago, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know. Time flies when you're having fun, right? So I built a house, and when I say I built a house, I mean me and Dad got out there with our bare hands and some nail guns and built a house. So like blood, sweat, and many tears. He cried. No. No. We built a house. Another day I was looking at it, and I got paint coming off of that little trim around the roof. I'm like, this house is brand new. What do you mean coming off? I have a board that rotted out on my house. I put one board on the whole house. Everything else is concrete. Because I built it with Dad. That's what you do. I put one board on the house, the board rots. Behold, I'm making all things new. And I'm like, what? My house is already beginning to fall in. Not literally, but I got a board rotten, so it's tragic because I might have to get a paintbrush out. And there is nothing I hate worse than painting. So maybe mowing grass. No, take that back. Weed-eating grass. Anyway, behold, I'm making all things new. And I start to look around, and I see a house that was built 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and they're caving in, right? You see this everywhere. You drive down the road and you see an old car from like 1930s, and it's all rusted. And you're like, yeah. Bargain deal. I can see it, yeah. And you see it, and they're all rusted, man. You look around, and buildings collapse, and buildings fall in. We lived in West Texas, in a town we lived in when we were doing youth ministry, and the town we lived in, like all the buildings were abandoned, and like these big, you could tell they were really nice hotel at one time, just collapsing, falling in. And I'm like, wow, man, it seems like the world's coming to an end. And you see people work, and they work hard, and they work hard all their lives, and they get to the end, and then you see the economy collapse. And you start to lose everything. And you lose your jobs, and you lose money, and you lose your retirement, and your nest egg. And I'm from a generation, we don't even know what that is. Like, my parents had that stuff. I don't know what that is. And you see all this, and you're like, behold, I'm making all things new. And you see tragedy in the world, and you see big, huge chunks of the world getting rich, and other parts of the world starving to death. You know, you see people with abundance and waste, and you see other people that have nothing, and you're like, God, you're making all things new. You see hurt and suffering and tears, and you got cancer, and you got AIDS, and you got all of these diseases that are just rampant in our world today. And you're like, all things new? And you're kind of confused, and you're like, man, did Jesus really say that? Well, it must be sometime in the future then, because I don't see it. And I don't understand, so it's got to be sometime in the future. But here's the problem with that, is when Messiah comes, he makes all things new. When Messiah comes, he restores the kingdom of heaven forever. When Messiah comes, there's resurrection of the dead, there's healing of the sick, there's the raising of the dead, there's judgment of God, right? When Messiah comes, these things take place. And so we look at our world and we go, well, maybe sometime in the future. But see, I believe with all of my heart, and I try to tell everybody this, my basis when I start to open my Bible is not when will Jesus be Messiah, but the fact that actually Jesus is in fact Messiah, and when he came, he did exactly what Messiah did. I told y'all the story last Easter how I got fired up because I was on the way to church, and I heard on the radio somebody said, when Jesus comes back, he'll get it right next time. Dude, I was like, I want to rip somebody apart, which is totally in Jesus. I had a little table kicking energy come over me. Now, and so here's the thing. Behold, I'm making all things new. And here's what God started showing me. Everything that I make and everything that we work on, the greatest accomplishments of human beings, throughout history, the ones that are notable, right, are discoveries of what God's already done. You notice that? Or a discovery of how God did something. They're discoveries of the way things work. Nobody's created anything that's, wow, that's awesome. They're discoveries of something God's done or the way God works. And these people go down as like great, oh, wow, they discovered a planet, 1 million miles from here. Well, who do you think put that there? Ooh, wow, don't wow me with your discovery of what I've already done. God and everything he does, according to Genesis and according to the Messiah who comes, is making all things new. And I started thinking about this, and I started looking, and here's what I figured out. I work a lot. And I mean, on things that I do and things that I create. And here's one of the examples. I mow my grass, which if you think about it, could be technically sin. Technically. Because obviously it's the will of God that grass grow. So obviously I am working against the will of God. Right? I was thinking about this. I live on I'm not a country person. Like, you can have all the scenery and all the country and the hills and the grass. I want some concrete. I want an apartment. I want something where I'd like to have an apartment without neighbors. It'd be awesome. Somebody invent one of those, that'd be great. I could do just concrete everything. I don't need any of that grass, weed eating, mowing, whatever. Bugs, mosquitoes, ants, all of it. Take it all. Just give me a concrete and a swimming pool. Right. That'll be good. So, I live in the country, and in the country, you have grass. And here's what I'm thinking. I fight this whole time. All summer, I'm fighting grass, and it grows, and I cut it, and it grows, and I cut it. It grows a lot by the house. Have y'all noticed that? Like, you have to weed eat more than you need to mow. I don't understand it, how the grass by the house grows faster. So all summer, I'm working against God and trying to stop what he's doing. And I thought to myself, if humanity quit working against God, what would everything look like? It would look like a jungle, right? I mean, it would be my field, which why anybody needs one of those, I have no idea, would be a forest. In a few hundred years, right? Because my trees drop stuff that plant other trees. And here's what I realized. God is making all things new. Our world, if you look at nature, nature is not reverting. Nature is repairing. Nature is restoring. Nature is replenishing. Nature heals itself. If you cut down a tree, I will tell you a shoot will grow up out of that tree stump. We work so hard against God, right? And we don't even realize it. Filthy sinners mowing your yards. God is making all things new. It's amazing how our environment compensates for what we do to it, right? Our world is in a healing, repairing, restoring itself state. And everybody says, oh, the world's going to hell, the world's ending, the world's this, it's bad, everything. No, the Bible says, no, it's not. It said, I'm not into that. Now, you can work hard at it, but you aren't going to overcome it. You can chop that grass. Listen to this. You can use Roundup on your whole yard, and that grass will come back. Amen? Trust me. I was telling Howard, I want to get a spreader, like you do with fertilizer, just put rock salt in it. Just salt my yard down. Grass will grow back. It will grow back. Behold, I'm making all things new. And here's what else I noticed, that everything that I do, that I build, that humanity creates and makes awesome and perfect and cool and hip and new wave. And you're not hip if you use the word hip. So, our new wave, where did that come from? Flock of seagulls. Everything we do, have you noticed it's falling apart? How many of you guys got a new car that's now old? We get a new car, it gets old. We get another new car, it gets old. We get another new car, it gets old. We get another new car, it gets old. They always get old. We build a house, it rots down. It may not rot down in your life, but your great-great-grandkids are going to have to move that junk heap you put up there, a piece at a time, because it's coming down because you built it. Here's what I want you to see today, guys. Jesus is making all things new. Anything that's in God is getting new. Anything that is in God is being restored. Anything that is in God is being repaired. Anything that is in God is replenishing, repairing, resolving, overcoming. And anything that I do is causing destruction and loss, and it's being torn up, and it's being judged by the fire constantly. Everything that is in God, anything that I do that is in Him, is, Paul says it like this in the New Testament, is gold and silver and precious jewels and things that will remain. And everything that I do is, Paul says like this, it's wood, hay, and stubble. And everything gets tested through the fire. Everything faces judgment. Judgment begins with Messiah, right? And so everything's going through judgment. And the judgment fires are burning. And I know this because I will work hard at something and then find myself suffering loss. Man, I worked so hard at that, and it just turned into nothing. I spent so much money and time and energy and effort. And then this other thing, when I'm walking with God and He's leading and guiding my steps and He's making all things new, I'm not putting forth work. I'm just kind of riding along, and it's all gold and silver and precious jewels, right? Anybody else experience that? And so what I'm seeing is that Jesus might just be making all things new, but it might not be what I think it is. And so I want to ask you today, what is it that you're working on in your life? Because work, this is my definition of work, work is sin. Work is fighting against what God is doing naturally, right? God's growing grass naturally. I'm working. It's work to cut it. That's sin. I'm just kidding. Dude, you can use that, though. Your wife tells you need to mow the yard. You're going to hell. Not me. I'll never sin again. Work is energy exerted to stop what's happened naturally, right? To overcome gravity is work. That's happening naturally, so it's work to pick something up. Well, what God is doing is restoring and repairing and making all things new, and we work very hard at destroying what He's making new. So it's hard to turn around and look at God and go, God, you really screwed my marriage up. And God's like, dude, if you were abiding in me, if your marriage was in me, it would be naturally thriving. But you're working hard at messing it up. What is in God and what is given to God is going to be restored and repaired and renewed. So what are you working on? Are you working on a career? Are you working on your marriage? Are you working on raising your kids? Here's the thing, man. We work on all this stuff, and maybe it's just not going to help. And maybe at the end of the day, we're going to be tired, exhausted, and ready to throw in the towel. Maybe at the end of the day, we just are like, man, this is just, I can do nothing. I can't do this. I can't stay in this. I can't handle this. I'm not going to hang around for this. And we're just ready to quit and give up on it all. But Jesus says, behold, I'm making all things new. But instead of surrendering, laying down and giving our marriage, our kids, our jobs, our careers to God, and letting Him work like He naturally does for the restoration of all things, to make all things new, maybe instead of doing that, we just work hard and work hard and work hard and burn out and quit. Or change. You know, go get some new kids. Go get a hotter wife. I can't do that, so it's not possible. Behold, I'm making all things new. What we've got to figure out is that what is it that I'm working so hard on that's absolutely producing nothing? Maybe those are the things that God is trying to restore and renew. Maybe God's trying to grow grass in your yard and you slave and weed eat and mow and hedge and edge and whatever you do in those yards. And maybe God's trying to restore and repair, but you don't like the way he's doing it. You're calling them weeds, and he's calling them life. Maybe our perspective gets off. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we're just not seeing things like God sees them. Maybe we think that we're dying and the earth's going bad, but we just keep looking at what we've done and keep missing what God's doing. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we're missing that God is solving and God is restoring and God is making all things new. And we just got the wrong perspective. You know what I mean? So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to start, just maybe even sit down and make a list and say, what am I working on? And you'll know if it's work because, well, it's work. You'll be working. What am I working on? And then here's the biggest challenge of it all. Take what you're working on and lay it down. Surrender it. Say, God, I have worked on my marriage and I'm at the point of quitting. God, these kids are driving me crazy. I'm done with them. About ready to just send them to military school, which there's nothing wrong with. No, I'm just kidding. Just ready to get rid of them, get them out of here. Have you thought about saying, God, I'm sorry for trying to fix my marriage. I'm sorry for trying to fix my kids. God, I'm sorry for trying to fix my career. I surrender it to you. Do with my kids, with my family, with my marriage what you do. Restore it. Make it new. Look, I guarantee you that God has a perfect, good plan for you, even if you don't know what it is. Even if it terrifies you. Even if it looks like you're going 5 steps backwards. Well, maybe you've been 5 steps on the wrong road. Sometimes all you can do is turn around and go back to where you got off, right? But today my prayer for you is that you'll look at that and that you'll see where you're working and what you're slaving into and surrender those things to God. Here's what I've found in my life. Everything that I submit and surrender to the will of God grows and becomes new. And it becomes better and newer. And as it grows, it doesn't get old and worn out. It gets newer and better. And that seems to be the opposite of the way I do things. It's a better way to live, guys. Living in the will of God, living by the will of God, surrendering our lives to God is a better way to live. And it will prove itself if you will give him a chance. Let me pray for you. God, I come.
You know